Hi everybody, it's great to be back here again. It's about it's Friday. It's Sukkot. Parasha. We're reading about the Sukkah, and we are on the holiday of Sukkot. And here we are in my Sukkah. Wow, what a special ambience! I want to bring that to your home, to wherever you are. Feel here Sukkot in the land of Israel and Itzma. And today's focus is going to be on the Arava over here, the willow. But before we do so, we have to talk a little bit about, we all know about the four species. Well, there's a beautiful midrash. And the midrash talks about in Vayikra Rabbah that each one of the four species that we do on the holiday represents a typical sector of the people of Israel. So, for example, this beautiful etrog, the citron, which has a smell to it and has a taste to it, represents those who are righteous and those who have good deeds. But if we go on to the tamal, the tamal is the dekel, as we say in Hebrew, the palm branch. And the palm branch, we know the palm branch has delicious fruit, right? But there is really no smell to the palm. So that represents those who have Torah, right, a taste to them. So they study Torah, but they don't have good deeds. So unfortunately, there are those who are very, very knowledgeable in Torah, but don't have the good deeds they're supposed to have. The myrtle, on the other hand, has a good smell to it, but doesn't have a taste. So the myrtle represents those who do wonderful deeds, but they lack Torah. They don't study Torah, unfortunately. So each one of those represents a different element. And then finally, the willow. What is the willow? The willow has no taste or smell. So the Midrash says they represent the willows. Here we'll see one as a willow. They represent those who don't have Torah or good deeds, so what we call the evil ones. So these are four sectors of Israel. But the Midrash says something so beautiful, and it says, God says, well, I can't just do away with the willows. So what I wanted to do is I want you to bring them all together on the holiday. And by doing so, we bind them together. One atones for the other. So in other words, we can't do without the willow. It has, as one nation, as we say, we're all together. We're all together as one nation. Is a concept in Hebrew called a tzibur. A tzibur is the people. The people represent, the tzaddik is for the tzaddikim, the righteous. The bet for the average people, right? Those who have good deeds but don't have so much Torah, you can say. Right, and then you have the tzaddikim benunim, and then the rishaim, the ones who are represented by totally, without any good deeds or Torah. And then you have again in between, whatever. That's a population. That's a tzibur. And God is telling us to bring them all together. And the Midrash says something so powerful that God says, when we bring them all together, you are uplifting me. We all know when we go into exile, God goes into exile with us. So when Israel uplifts its people together, and we are all bounded together as one nation, so we are lifting up God. God is being, as if, of course, right? We're told these are spiritual concepts. The Creator is beyond our grasp, but it's as if we are lifting up the Creator of the universe Himself. And that's the very powerful words of the Midrash here can actually read part of it too, because I think it's fascinating to see the words here. So Midrash says like this: Ma kadosh baruch hu oseh lehem labdam efshar. What does God do? He can't eliminate the evil ones, right? Ela ma kadosh baruch hu yuksheru kulam aguda achat. But God says, let them all be bound together as one unit. Vehem mechaprim elu al elu, and one will atone for the other. V'masitem kach ota sha'ani mitalel. If you do that, at that same time, I rise up, God says. He brings down a verse from Amos. Amazing. Amazing, amazing. So we see, and that's what it says, the Midrash goes on to say, and that is what Moshe Rabbeinu commands Israel, that you will take on the first day these four species. So, the holiday of Sukkot is very unique and very special. There are many different aspects that we can talk about on holiday. Right now we're in a Sukkah. The laws of the Sukkah are also very, very difficult, and so many different laws that are involved here. regarding the walls of the sukkah, regarding the ceiling, the schach as we say, regarding the size, the proper size of the sukkah, regarding where you could build it, in relation to trees or houses. There's so many laws that are involved here. Most people are not aware. They do the basics, and it's fine. Nothing wrong with that. Not everyone is a rabbi, but if you ever go really through detailed study, you'll see how many laws are involved in just understanding the boundaries of the sukkah, etc. And of course, the laws relating to the different species. And we'll just give an example here. We're talking about today the arava, the willow. Well, it has to be a willow, right? Can't be a eucalyptus tree, although there were those that thought they could bring a eucalyptus tree or other species that seem similar. But it has to be, the Talmud talks about clear signs to recognize a kosher arava. And what are the signs? Number one, it has to have part of the stem has to be red. You see the redness here. So it's a kosher arava. The leaves have to be elongated. And elongated and again smooth. You see a lot of times there are leaves that are going looks like a saw in different directions. That's not good. The leaves should be smooth. If you have little tiny saw-like extrusions on the leaves that coming in one direction, that's fine. It's still, you don't really, when you look at it, it looks smooth. That's what it means. So those are the basics. The head of it can't be cut off. It has to be, for example, totally like one branch growing properly. A lot of times it falls off, and then there's like leaves coming out of it, like it sort of heals itself, like a wound, and then it starts to burst forth with a new growth, and that's not kosher. You have to be careful to make sure it's a natural growth of the leaf, and so it didn't break and is regrowing. So we have to be careful about the laws relating to this aravar as well. And also the leaves, when they become dried out, they're no longer kosher. How do we know they're dried out? When you can crumble them. But if like this, they're sort of weeping over a little bit, but they're still, if you put them back in water, and they'll prop up and they'll turn back to life again, it means they're still alive. So they're kosher. So just a few laws relating to the arava. The size of it, for example, has to be at least 3 handbreadths. The basic handbreadth. Now the big hand would be, mine is around 10 centimeters. So that would be 30 centimeters would make a kosher size. And then again, there are opinions at 24 centimeters. So that's Reb Chaim. That's fine as long as it's 24 centimeters and above. It's a kosher arava. But today's focus, I want to focus a little more on the special custom that took place in the temples. We all know the bringing of the lulav and the etrog is every day in the holiday of Sukkot. The first day outside the temple has a very special significance. It is a Torah commandment that even individuals that are outside the temple, that first day has that, as we call deoraita. But in the times of the temple, every day, there was a special mitzvah, a special commandment of the Torah to bring the lulav and etrog, and what we would do every day, we would bring the lulav and etrog to the temple, and we would actually circle the altar. So we had the custom of also circling the altar. In addition, there was something called the arava, right? The arava, and the arava is a very special custom where according to most opinions, and the Talmud brings down Abba Shaul, that try to learn now from the Torah itself, but in reality, according to most opinions, it's a custom of our prophets. A law from Sinai that was handed down to us, that we have a special custom of bringing the arava as well, as its own unit. Besides bringing the 4 species, we'd have to bring this as a separate unit, and they would stand them up by the altar. And these were very, very tall pieces, branches. They would take them. They would have to be around 5.5 meters high. That was the custom. I'd like to bring the Mishnah, which talks about this custom of the arava. We'll bring it down together. And it says like this. If we look in the tractate of Sukkah, chapter 4, the 5th Mishnah, it says like this: Mitzvat arava ketzad. There was a special commandment of the arava. How was that? First, I'll read Mishnah Gimel. First, I'll read the 3rd one. Arava Shiva, right? The arava was brought 7 days. Ketzad Yom HaShvi shel arava shechal liyot b'Shabbat. Arava Shiva v'shar koyimim shisha. So the Mishnah opens up at saying that the lulav and the arava, I'm not going to go into all the details here, were brought, they can be brought theoretically 7 straight days. What would happen if Shabbat came out in the middle of the week? It wasn't on the 7th day. So then on Shabbat, the Arava and the Lulav weren't brought at that time. And then, there was a time that they weren't brought. And their answer is because on Shabbat, it doesn't push off Shabbat if it's not, only if it's on the last day, or the 7th day, that special custom that there was on the 7th day, called Shoshana Rabbah. Then the Arava was brought, even if it was Shabbat, the Arava was done on Shabbat itself. Otherwise, it wasn't pushing off Shabbat. If it just came out during the week, like a Chol HaMoed thing. And the same thing regarding the etrog. If it was the first day of Sukkot was on Shabbat, in the temple they would actually bring the lulav and etrog. And outside today, our custom is if it's Shabbat, even on the first day we don't do the lulav and etrog, although it's in the Torah. And the reasons behind that is because we're not experts in the Talmud says in the declaring the calendar and etc. The reason we don't do it on Shabbat is because they're worried about carrying it, to learning how to wave it properly, and someone carrying it outside an area we know we're not allowed to carry on the Sabbath. So that was the concern. But getting back again to the custom, we look in if we look in the 5th Mishnah, right? It says mitzvat arava ketzad. Well, what was the mitzvah arava? Makom haya lemata miYerushalayim minikam Motza. There's a place called Motza. Anyone who lives in near Jerusalem knows where Motza is. It's a moshav today. Yoldim misham u'milaktim misham arviyot shel arava. They would go down there and they would take these branches of the arava. Uvain v'zokvim otam b'tzidei mizbeach. And they would stand them up by the corners of the altar. V'rashahen kfufim al gabei mizbeach. And the tops of them were bent over the altar. Now, the altar was 10 cubits, so that was 11. 5.5 meters, it had to go over to bend over the altar. Taku v'riva taku, they blew the shofar. B'chol yom akifim et hamizbeach pam achat. This was done every day, and every day it says they circled the altar once. And there's a question if did they circle the altar with the arava or they circled the altar with the lulav and etrog. There's different opinions on that. I'm not going into the details. And then it goes on to say, V'omrim ana Hashem Moshiana. And they would say, God, save us, make us successful, etc., etc. This was the custom of every day in the temple. And we go on to learn that on the 7th day, there were 7 circles made around the altar itself, right? And that was done on the 7th day. And the Talmud in the Jerusalem Talmud says the circling of the altar 7 times is connected to Jericho, to remember the story of Jericho in the land of Israel when they actually circled the city of Jericho 7 times and the walls fell down. So the question is, what is this whole special custom we had regarding the Arava? It was so powerful. There's a story mentioned in the Talmud. There was one of the sects at that time called the Baitosim. The Baitosim were a sect that did not believe in the oral traditions. And one time came out that the 7th day of Sukkot, which was the Hoshana Rabbah, was on the Sabbath. So the Baitosim, so Israel gathered up on Friday. They gathered up all the aravot, they cut them in advance, and they put them in these barrels to keep them nice and fresh for Shabbat when they were going to do the banging of the aravot, the custom. And the Baitosim saw this, so what they did, they took the aravot and they put them under stones, knowing that the stones are muks on Shabbat. You don't move stones on the Sabbath. And they wanted to interfere. They wanted to prevent the custom of the chavata, of bringing the aravot on the 7th day, which was the Jewish custom, right? Which was the custom of Israel. But they were Baitosim, this sect that had believed that they didn't go by the oral tradition, and they wanted to follow the Torah doesn't say this. So they said it doesn't push off the Sabbath. You can't do this on the Sabbath. So they placed them under the rocks. And what happened was the Amcha, as we say, the populace, the people, the regular, we're not talking about the rabbis, the leaders, but the simple people came and they saw this, what the Baitosim did, they put the aravot under the stones and they just threw up, they pulled them out under the stones and they gave them to the priests who were able to do what they had to do. And of course, they did what they had to do on the custom of the seventh day, on the custom of the Arava. So we see how impacting this custom is. Talmud actually brings down the story and discusses this whole thing. What is the deep message behind the Arava? Well, we know that we began a long journey of many, many days of repentance, beginning in 40 days before, before the Day of Atonement. We began with the customs of saying Slichot, getting up in the morning and praying and asking for forgiveness, and then we're all judged on the New Year, and then the Day of Atonement comes in, and then we are sealed. Our judgment is sealed on the Day of Atonement. But our rabbis teach us that we have, in reality, is that our judgment is sealed really at this time, but it is like these, the decrees, all the decrees that, that we went through judgment. We have all these. Our sentence basically is in limbo, and it's written down on paper, but those who are supposed to bring out, the retribution and the punishments for the things that, people did throughout the year and they were judged for. So God puts a hold on that, and He says, "Well, I'm giving you the last chance. The last chance is on the special day, Hoshana Rabbah, when we are going to bring besides the 4 species, that special Arava ceremony. That is going to be our last chance on that day to repent by calling out. We pray a lot. That's why the custom when people stay up very, very late and learn Torah all night and pray early in the morning and Vatikin, and they have all the prayers we do. It's very similar reminds us of the Yom Kippur in a way. And literally using that last opportunity to reverse bad decisions that were made against us. And that's called Hoshana Rabbah. Right? That's the day of the last day of Sukkot, right before we enter the holiday of Shmini Atzeret. Right? It's a new holiday which is totally connected to Sukkot. But that's the last opportunity we have of reversing the decision that was made against us, the bad decisions that were made during the holiday, during the Yom Kippur Day of Atonement. So it's so interesting that this is reflected within the Arava. The custom is to bring on the Arava, the day of Hoshana Rabbah, 5, not one of these, we have 5 of them. You can, in reality, if you don't have 5, you can really bring 1 is enough. But the custom is according to the Ariyah Kadosh, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, which is spread through all of Israel today. We bring 5, we tie them together. Most, some people don't say you don't have to tie them together, but most say you tie them together. And these 5 Aravot is we do an additional, besides, doing 7 Hakafot with the Lulav and the Trove, we're going around Hoshanot, 7 Hakafot. We go 7 times around in the synagogue, the Torah scrolls, reminding us, of course, is the altar. And then we take these 5 Aravot afterwards, and what we do is we go outside and we strike the ground 5 times with these Aravot. And the whole concept, the whole idea is when we are striking the ground with the Aravot, we are, according to the Kabbalistic teachings, we are sweetening our judgment. So it's all. This was the custom. This was the custom of the prophets. What we're talking about. This was the custom that was handed down thousands of years as a custom of Israel, which we said pushes off the Sabbath. We can take these Aravot on the Sabbath, and we bang them. Now, again, there's no work done here, right? Also, but it's something that is done. It's unusual, right? Unusual thing on the Sabbath, as we said before. The concept of the Arava is very interesting, and as we said, it represents those who have no good deeds, right? So we can say, why are we taking 5 of these now? So here we know our whole lives in this world is really to rectify, right? We said that day itself is a day of rectification, of our last chance to reverse the decisions that were made against us. But in reality, it all is connected to the evil, right, in the world. The part of Israel that is not involved in Torah, that is not involved in good deeds. But God, God says it's part of the nation, but we have to rectify. This is what rectifying is all about. And therefore, on Sukkot, at that very moment, according to the teachings, at that very moment we are being sealed. The judgment, God is saying, okay, angels, take these the sentence that I made, and I want you to go out and go ahead, take care of, do your job now of bringing out the retribution. So at that moment, as we strike the ground with these 5 aravot, we are sweetening our judgment. We have a chance to reverse things. But of course, this representing an element of our nation is that we are not only, of course, rectifying ourselves, but and more than anything, we are always concerned about reaching out to everybody, right? Trying to reach out to all those who really didn't have a chance to study Torah, didn't have a chance to grow up with Torah in their lives, and those who, unfortunately, because of that, a lot of times, not having good deeds goes along with lack of Torah, because Torah gives you that framework, that fabric of doing good deeds and knowing how important it is to be ethical and moral. Unfortunately, there are those who have Torah and don't have those good deeds, but we are trying to rectify those situations through the banging, striking of the aravah, which is so interesting. I thought of also a concept. The holiday of Sukkot is all about boundaries. Right here we are right now in this little ark. It's like we're going to be reading in a couple of weeks the Noah about the ark. So we're sort of in this ark, right? We're sort of surrounded by these walls and protected. We're all under the protection, right? The ananei kavod, right? Those clouds of glory which are reflected within the sukkah itself, which is a very special incubator, or what's the word? A very, very special hothouse, right? We are here being protected by Hashem, a very special environment. And the aravah, there, when we strike the aravah, we're no longer, we go outside to do this, right? We have to be outside on the ground. There's no more separation, we're not, you got to do this directly on the ground, according to the Aliyah Kadosh, right? Some people say afterwards you can use a vessel to knock the leaves off, but no, in reality, you hit it 5 times, you don't have to knock the leaves out of it, you can still give it to someone else to use afterward. But the point is that we are touching the ground. The ground, as we know, is the malchut, in Hebrew is the concept. The ground is the malchut. The whole idea, the whole concept of this world is to see how Hashem comes down to this world, right? But regarding the very, very interestingly, when the tractate or the Talmud talks about the laws of the Sukkah, it shows that where do we learn out of mechitza from? Where do we learn out what a kosher wall is all about? And the minimal height of a kosher wall is 10 tfachim, which is around 80 centimeters. Now that, right, between 80 and a meter, right, as mentioned, which is a very small, that's a wall that causes, you need a minimal sized wall. That is learned out. That whole thing, where do we learn this out from? We learn it out from the temple, which is very interesting. We learn it out from the ark. That God, it says the ark itself was 9 cubit. It was 9 tfachim, which was 1 short, right, of being 10, of a kosher mechitza, because we also had the kapoet, the covering of the ark. So the covering of the ark was a tefach, together was 10 cubits, as I said, which was around between 80 and the figure 80 and a meter, 100 centimeters. That was the height of the ark. It says that God came down up to that point. And he doesn't go below 10 cubits. 10 below a meter, right? 10 handbreadths. Tfachim, as we're saying here. Now, that we learn out from the ark itself. It's so fascinating. So, and it brings down other sources as well, that God comes down to a certain extent. But not all the way. There's always a certain gap. So that distance of 10 handbreadths is really the distance that God doesn't come down to. What does God want us to do? God wants us to break down the boundaries and go up and meet him above those 10 handbreadths. So we have a job. God is saying, I'm not going to do all the work for you, but you're going to help me. So I'm going to come down to a certain extent, but you have to come up to me. You have to come, and that comes through by doing all the good deeds that we do, and the Torah and all that we study, and all the many, many commandments that we fulfill. That is our way of breaking down the boundaries. So on Sukkot, we have a very special privilege. God, within our boundaries, comes down to our sukkah. But as holiday ends now, we are leaving this sukkah, and the boundary is going to be broken down again. Right? The walls are opened up. And we feel we're losing our ark. We are coming out of the ark, we're losing our protection, our force field of protection. But God is saying, through the Aravah, right, the ceremonies we do, the last day of Sukkot, is to show that you're going to come out and you're going to touch ground. And you're going to strike the ground with the Aravah. And by doing so, we are showing to Hashem that we are going to stand up with 2 feet on the ground and reach out to Hashem. And say we are going to rectify the lack of taste and the lack of smell. And that's the beauty of Sukkah. We are every day gaining our energy from the Sukkah after the holiday of atonement, and we're spending many days and very closest to God and atoning and praying to Hashem. And now all this, going out of our homes, entering the Sukkah, feeling God's hug, God's protection. And then we're going to be going out like warriors, ready now to start a year, another year of being on the ground, 2 feet on the ground as we connect to the world, this world that we live in, but standing upright and showing how we are going to build our lives, connecting ourselves to the creator of the universe through reaching out. What we're doing through the Aravah, right? We are rectifying those bad deeds, and we want to rectify and reach out to all those who need us. And of course, start by rectifying ourselves. It all begins by that as well. So these beautiful laws and customs that we have around our holidays are all really, in reality, very, very deep concepts of different stages of the year of how we build our lives. And the cycle is coming to an end now of our atoning and all that. We reached the peak of the holiday now, which we are right now in Shabbat. We're still in the holiday of Sukkot, but it comes to an end on the Shoshana Rabbah, on that day of the custom of beating the willows, and then from there we leave the Sukkah, right? It comes to an end with all that energy we gain, and then we enter the Shmini Atzeret. We go back into our homes, and that special holiday of Shmini Atzeret, which is all about one thing, our relationship with God, a special relationship with God, and dancing and celebrating over the beautiful Torah we have, everyone together, showing that everyone has a part in that Torah. And that's how we begin our year. After all these special days are sort of beyond, right, they're another realm completely. We go on and begin our year in that direction. Another fascinating point is that the Sukkot is a holiday where people don't realize it's so rooted into the nations of the world that we know nations of the world that don't come to Israel. They won't be blessed with bounty. In order to get their bounty, they have to come up on the holiday of Sukkot to the land of Israel. And through Israel, they will be blessed nations. And Israel, by bringing 70 offerings for the nations, it's a holiday where we rectify the nations as well. It's a very special element of the holiday, realizing that we're not only for ourselves. So here we are in our little booth, our little sukkah. People could think, hey, what about the world? Israel has to be a light to the nations. But God says, no, although you're in this little booth over here, you're reaching out to the world, and you are going to offer 70 offerings for the benefit of the world. And they will come to Jerusalem, right? They have that opportunity to reach out and connect to you, to people of Israel as well. That's part of our mission as well, right? Although we're now a little booth. And when that's over, Shmini Atzeret, that stage, the last day of that is the day of the banging, right? It's interesting. And then it's sort of a very private time Israel has with God on that last day of the holiday, Shmini Atzeret, which is now a holiday of itself. And then with those two elements, we go out and we can start our year. So we can't forget that here Sukkot reflects rectifying those who need to rectify, reaching out to the nations of the world, or again, as we said before, the willow, which represents that concept of the willow, the lack of taste and smell. And then from the Sukkah, we are now, our batteries have been recharged. We prayed hard, we worked hard, God forgave us. In that last day of Hoshana Rabbah, we are now getting there were bad sentences on those letters that were written against us. God rips them up now because of our special work we've done on our last day of the holiday. So I think it's an important lesson to reach out and learn about the willow, what it all means, and utilize that last day of Sukkot, which is coming up on Sunday. That morning we're going to pray in the synagogue, and it's good to learn on Saturday night, to learn at night Torah. And that night is very important to realize that that's the last opportunity this year we have to rectify what was already sealed for us, and then we go on with our energy to have a beautiful year. So anyway, Chag Sameach, Shabbat Shalom, and we shall be in touch. B'Sorot Tovot, Yeshua Dechamon. Bye bye.